My sister screamed that night, and in one moment, my home stopped feeling like mine. I stood there quiet, realizing silence can be the sharpest kind of revenge. If you've ever been hurt by the people who were supposed to love you most, stay with me. Like this story, subscribe to this channel and listen closely, because this is not a story about shouting or fighting. This is a story about quiet strength and the kind of revenge that comes from patience. My name is Ruth. I am not young anymore. I am not dramatic, and I never thought my own sister would be the person who made me feel homeless in my own life. I tell this story slowly because it still hurts when I rush it. I tell it calmly because anger already took enough from me. And I tell it honestly because someone out there may be living the same silence I lived in. I was the older sister, the responsible one, the one who stayed when others left, and for most of my life, I believed that meant something. When Clara and I first started living together after our parents were gone, everything felt quiet in a strange way, not peaceful, just careful, like we were both afraid to touch something fragile that might break if we spoke too loudly. The house felt heavy with memories. Our mother's favorite chair was still by the window. The kitchen still smelled faintly like old spices and soap. At night, the floor creaked the same way it always had, reminding me I wasn't alone, even when it felt that way. I tried to keep things normal. I cooked simple meals. I cleaned the rooms we shared. I paid my half of every bill right on time. Clara handled things differently. She took control without asking. She decided what needed fixing, what needed changing, and what didn't matter anymore. She spoke like the house already belonged to her alone. At first, I told myself it was just stress. Grief makes people strange. Loss can sharpen someone's voice without them realizing it. So I stayed patient. We ate dinner together most nights, sitting across from each other at the same table we used as children. The conversations were short, mostly about money, repairs, or things she wanted to do next. I listened more than I spoke. Sometimes she would sigh and say, "This place costs more than you think." I would nod and answer quietly, "I know, that's why I pay my part." She never thanked me, she never disagreed either. Slowly the house stopped feeling shared. She rearranged furniture without asking. She replaced things that still worked. She spoke about my plans instead of our plans. I noticed she stopped saying our parents' names. She talked about the house like it was an investment, like a tool, not a home. I still believed things would settle down. I believed kindness would soften her. I believed that being calm would keep peace, but calm, I learned, can look like weakness to the wrong person. The change didn't happen all at once. It crept in quietly, like cold air through a door that never quite closed. At first, it was just little moments that made me pause and question myself. Clara started correcting me in front of other people. If I mentioned a bill, she would say, "I already handled that." Even when I hadn't asked, if I cleaned the kitchen, she would walk in afterward and redo it, not saying a word, just letting me know my effort wasn't good enough. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was being sensitive. I told myself siblings argue, and this was normal. One evening, I asked her gently, "Could you let me know before inviting people over?" She looked at me like I had insulted her. "This is my house too," she said. "I don't need to check with you." Her words were sharp, but her tone was calm. That made it worse. It felt planned. After that, she stopped including me in decisions completely. Repairs were made without discussion. Money was spent without explanation. I found out about changes after they were already done. She began reminding me of everything she did, how much she worked, how tired she was, how much responsibility sat on her shoulders. Sometimes she would say, "I don't think you understand how much I carry." I wanted to say I carried things too. Grief, loneliness, fear, but I stayed quiet. The air in the house grew tight. We moved around each other like strangers. I felt smaller in rooms I had grown up in, and slowly I began to understand something painful. This wasn't about the house anymore. It was about control. The night everything broke was quiet at first. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your chest feel tight before anything even happens. We were sitting at the table, eating dinner. The same table we had used since childhood. The light above us flickered softly, and the food had gone cold. Clara kept tapping her fork against the plate, over and over. I could feel something building, but I didn't know what. Then she slammed the fork down. "I'm tired," she said. "Tired of pretending this works." I looked up at her. My heart was already racing, but my voice stayed calm. "What do you mean?" She leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. Her eyes were sharp, focused, like she had been waiting for this moment. "I do everything," she said. "I pay attention, I plan, I handle things." Then she looked straight at me and said, "And you just take up space." Those words landed heavier than a shout. I felt my face grow warm, but I didn't respond right away. "I live here," I said softly. "This is my home too." That's when she stood up. Her chair scraped loudly across the floor. Her voice rose, filling the room. "You'll sign over your half of the house to me," she screamed, "if you want a place to live." Time seemed to stop. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. I could hear my own breathing. Everything else faded. I looked at her and asked one question very quietly. "And if I don't?" She smiled, not a kind smile, a certain one. "Then you can leave." After she said those words, the room felt empty, even though we were both still there. I didn't answer her right away. I couldn't. It felt like something deep inside me had cracked open, and I needed a moment just to breathe. I stood up slowly and carried my plate to the sink. My hands were shaking, but I didn't let her see it. I rinsed the dish, set it in the rack, and wiped the counter like it was any normal night. Clara watched me with her arms crossed. She was waiting for tears, for begging, for fear. She got none of that. That night, I went to my room and closed the door quietly. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the walls, the same walls I had painted years ago, laughing with our mother. The memories felt heavy, like they were pressing down on me. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there, listening to the house breathe. Every sound felt louder. Every creak felt like a reminder that nothing was safe anymore. For the first time, I understood something clearly. Clara didn't see me as her sister anymore. She saw me as an obstacle. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. Not anger, not hate, just a quiet decision. I realized that if I stayed silent out of fear, I would lose everything. But if I stayed silent on purpose, I might finally protect myself. That was the night I stopped trying to be understood and started planning to stand on my own. The next morning, the house felt different, not louder, not calmer, just colder. Clara moved through the kitchen like nothing had happened. She made coffee, scrolled on her phone, and hummed under her breath. It was as if the words she had screamed the night before had never left her mouth. I watched her from across the room. I realized something then. She expected me to break. She expected me to apologize for taking up space. Instead, I poured myself a cup of tea and sat down quietly. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I didn't ask her to take back what she said. I started paying closer attention to how she spoke, to what she assumed, to how confident she felt in her control over me. That day, I took a long walk by myself. The air was cool and the sky was gray. I let my thoughts move slowly, one at a time. I asked myself a simple question: what happens if I don't give in? For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel panic. I felt focus. I went home and gathered every paper connected to the house. Old files, letters, documents I had never really looked at before. I didn't tell Clara what I was doing. I didn't warn her. I understood now that strength didn't need an audience, and silence, when chosen, could become protection. That was the day I stopped surviving and started preparing. The days that followed moved slowly, but something inside me stayed steady. I went about my routines like always. I cooked. I cleaned. I spoke when spoken to. Clara, on the other hand, grew louder, more confident. It was as if she believed the house was already hers. She talked about changes she wanted to make, walls she planned to tear down, rooms she wanted to rent out. She said my house without even noticing anymore. Sometimes she would glance at me and say, "You'll understand once things are settled." I nodded. I always nodded. But behind closed doors, I was learning. I read every document carefully. I made quiet phone calls. I asked questions without giving details. Each answer gave me more clarity. Each piece of information gave me more calm. I learned something important. The house was shared, legally and clearly. No matter how loudly Clara spoke, she couldn't erase that. She needed my agreement, my signature, my consent. I didn't need her approval to exist. At night, I lay in bed listening to the rain hit the roof. Instead of fear, I felt patience. I wasn't rushing anymore. I let Clara believe she was winning. I let her believe silence meant surrender. But silence was giving me time. One afternoon, Clara came home earlier than usual. She didn't say hello. She walked straight to the table and placed a stack of papers in front of my seat. "Just sign these," she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp. "I'm trying to make things easier for everyone." I picked up the papers slowly. I didn't rush. I read the first page, then the second. They were written carefully, too carefully, words meant to sound fair but leave me with nothing. Clara tapped her fingers on the table. "Don't drag this out," she said. "We both know how this should end." I folded the papers neatly and placed them back in front of her. "I won't be signing anything," I said. The room changed in an instant. Her face tightened, her voice rose. She listed everything she thought she had done for me. I stayed seated. I kept my voice low. "This is my home too," I said. "I'm not giving it away." She stood up so fast her chair fell backward. "You can't do this," she said. "You don't have a choice." I looked at her, calm and steady. "I do," I said, "and I'm choosing not to for the first time since our parents passed." She looked unsure, and I knew then that the balance had shifted. After that day, things didn't explode the way I once feared. They grew quiet in a different way. A careful, watchful quiet. Clara stopped shouting. She stopped making demands. Instead, she avoided me. She moved around the house like someone who no longer felt in control. Doors closed softly. Conversations ended quickly. I didn't celebrate. I didn't provoke her. I simply held my ground. I followed every rule. I paid my share. I kept records. I stayed calm. When she tried to push boundaries, I reminded her of facts. Not opinions, not feelings, just what was fair and written. She couldn't argue with that. She couldn't scare paperwork. Slowly her power over me faded, not because I, too, something from her, but because I refused to give anything away. That was my revenge. Not loud, not cruel, just quiet independence. And in that silence I finally felt strong. Clara moved out months later. She said it was her choice. I didn't correct her. The house feels quieter now, lighter. Some nights I still feel sad, not because I lost her, but because I lost the sister I thought I had. Revenge doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't need to hurt others. Sometimes revenge is simply refusing to disappear. Sometimes it's choosing yourself. Calmly, I stayed, I healed, and I learned that silence, when chosen, can be strength. If someone demands your life in exchange for comfort, walk slowly away from their control. You don't owe anyone your erasure. Quiet dignity lasts longer than shouting. If this story touched something in you, press like and share it with someone who needs strength tonight. Tell us in the comments, have you ever stood your ground in silence? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of quiet courage and real-life lessons. Thank you for listening.